Hyper-5 is a cinematic shoot-'em-up that's inspired by the retro 90s classics of the genre. For me personally, it's closest aligned to the game G Darius, which is one of my personal favourites, because A, it starts off with 3D environments then being mapped to a 2D plane, and you have some very cinematic intro and exit sequences and some cutscenes in between, but fundamentally you are playing in a 2D environment, where then enemy ships kind of come onto your plane and then leave it again. The other thing that reminds me of the Darius series as a whole is that most of the enemies in this game are based around bugs or fish of the sea, like eels, sharks, jellyfish, all of that kind of stuff, which is very Darius like universe vision. In Hyper-5 though, you start off with a singular ship and go into battle for what is almost like a roguelite experience, because as you kill various different enemies, you'll collect upgrade points, which are kind of converted from little mini missions that you complete, alongside just killing things in general. These upgrade points can then be spent in a variety of different ways. It could be that you upgrade the initial weapons that you have on your ship to begin with, and that would be like a standard shot that just goes in front of you, or the missiles that you have to manually trigger and will have a recharge before you can do them again. Or you can start to spend your upgrades on other things that you may have collected from enemies when they've dropped them behind, because you can unlock a tertiary type of weapon that could be, say, like a cyclone or an electric like jolt, or a tractor beam type thing, which was the one that I settled on. Or you could add on additional what's called outriders, and these are additional like pods that circulate around your main ship that can also bolster up your arsenal. So they could be, again, shots that go out ahead of you, they could be like shields that blanket some of the attacks that come towards you. It just depends on what you've unlocked as you go through the game, and then deciding what your loadout like plays around with. You can also spend your upgrades to actually just upgrade your ship's speed, the amount of continues you can have per go, and also the general overall health of your ship too. Now, the beauty in all of this is that there's lots of different variations for your Hyper-5 vessel that you can play around and muck about with. And what's really cool with this is that when you spend your points to upgrade certain types of weapons, you can downgrade and get all of the points back again and then spend them elsewhere. So it really rewards continuous playing so that you can then get as many points as possible, so that you can flip in and out and try and find the right setup for you. This is the way how the main like arcade mode and story mode takes place, because your ship will be defined by how you spend your upgrade points as to how good it is. So for instance, I would run with the multi-shot most of the time that I played this game, and initially that started out with just an up, down, left, right shot, but then through upgrades not only did the actual shots themselves get more powerful, but the amount of shots going out and the directions on the compass that they went out changed and got more like omnipresent and powerful, so that it wasn't just going in 4 directions, it was going in 8, but also very powerful. The same for missiles. I ended up landing on the Swarm, and that meant that actually they would have a further spread, they would be more powerful, the recharge was quicker, and so on and so forth. The tractor beam that I was using would have more energy per level and would do more damage over time. So there's lots of fun to invest here. The problem and the kind of slippy downside to this though is that Hyper-5 just has 5 levels, and whilst the 5th level in particular is quite long, what it does mean is that you'll have quite a lot of repetition over time if you really want to see all the different loadouts and invest enough playtime to really work out what your perfect setup is. And there's not enough game here for you to really get the most out of it. There's 2 different modes to Hyper-5. There's like a precision mode, which is the faster version of the game, or you can have the progressive mode, which is what I played most of my time with, which is slower, more deliberate, but quite easy for a new beginner to get into, because there's not tons and tons and tons of fire coming towards you. And that's just as well, because there's a couple of key things with how Hyper-5 works that irked me slightly the more that I played the game. My initial impressions of Hyper-5 was that I absolutely loved the cinematic way how and the stylings of how levels form. The camera switches around, it goes from different perspectives, and sometimes you're seeing your ship from up above, sometimes it's from the side, sometimes it's from different angles. The issue with this is that it's very difficult to then see if your enemies are on your plane or not, because you can only shoot directly ahead of you, and because you're expecting to see yourself largely in a 2D environment, you expect that to just be like straight ahead. However, there are quite a lot of levels, particularly in the undersea levels and in the final level, where there's loads and loads of enemies that aren't on your plane. And so they're shooting or busy shooting lots and lots of bullets at you, but you can never actually hit them back. So it ends up being like a weird odd window dressing where you can't actually affect or improve your outcomes of stuff, and it becomes a bit of a weird dodge 'em up. This also becomes really problematic on some of the issues where you choose different paths for like a valley in one of the levels, because ultimately you can't actually maneuver yourself around to hit some of these enemies, yet they can take free pops at you, and that feels a bit unfair and a bit clunky in the way how you try and survive the game, basically. Outside of the main mode, there's also a time trial mode, which is over way too quickly because you're trying to collect like all of the power-ups to keep your 45-second timer up and running for as long as possible. And there is like a arcade level select mode where you can dive in and just do your own thing, which is great too. And you can use this so that you can refine some of your playing style so that you can then attack the arcade with, again, more upgrade points, because everything that you do in this builds towards that upgrade system. But yeah, this is an odd one because it's slightly chaotic and woolly because of its camera work and design, and the fact that it's a 3D game that runs on 2D planes that doesn't let you move around the 2D planes. And that might be like a weird sentence to try and wrap your head around, but it just feels slightly unfair that all of the enemies can hit you and you can't hit them some of the times. And yeah, that just got a little bit frustrating on occasion when you just felt, this isn't fair, this isn't right. The other thing, obviously, as well, is that because you're moving in and out of a 3D plane, it's also actually quite difficult to know what environments are things that you're going to crash into and kill yourself on, and what you can't. And that's particularly true of your outriders, the things that circle around your ship. They, quite often I found, were ineffectual because you're often having to dive in and out of really tight spaces. You just smash them off. So I was like, oh, well, they're good for like 15-20 seconds and then they just fall off. So that was that, really. My last concern around this game is slightly around the graphical style of it. I love the like cinematic theming of it and the camera angles when it doesn't affect the gameplay, but particularly in the underwater levels, it's dark, it's murky, and it's very difficult to see some of the bullets that are coming your way, and it felt like I was being cheaply caught out by some murky graphics. Now, I've just moaned about Hyper-5 for quite some time, but there is something really good here. It's just very rough around the edges. So whilst I think some of the technical side of this is probably one of the best East Asia Soft ports that's come over to console in terms of a graphical style and the cinematic universe and what's going on around it, actually some of the gameplay just makes you go at the same time. So yeah, rough diamond this one. I think shoot 'em up fans will generally like this. Other people probably should stay clear. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.